The release of Al Jazeera journalist Peter Greste is a rare bit of good news for journalists in the Middle East, and we will stay on that story all day here on CNN. But on Saturday, we were all reminded again about the dangers of reporting in the region when this news broke. Another journalist apparently murdered in cold blood by ISIS. The man you see in this image is 47-year-old Kenji Goto of Japan, a veteran war reporter. He was kidnapped in Syria last October. ISIS brutally murdered a number of other hostages over the past year. You hopefully know their names now. American journalists Jim Foley and Steve Sotloff are two of them. What has happened to these journalists is gruesome, is despicable. But would you call the killers Islamic terrorists? It's not necessarily that simple of an answer. The White House and some in the press don't like to use those terms, and it makes some Republicans livid. In an interview that just aired last hour here on CNN, Fareed Zakaria pushed President Obama on the issue. Watch.
Lindsey Graham says that he's bothered by the fact that you won't admit that we're in a religious war. There are others who say that the White House takes pains to avoid using the term Islamic terrorist. So my question to you is, are we in a war with radical Islam?
I don't quibble with labels. I think we all recognize that this is a particular problem that has roots in Muslim communities. But I think we do ourselves a disservice in this fight if we are not taking into account the fact that the overwhelming majority of Muslims reject this ideology.
That's the president's take, and it's not just the president. We've seen discussions about word choice at major media outlets recently. A leaked memo from Al Jazeera revealed their strict guidelines when it comes to reporting on the T word. Here's what it says. This is from Al Jazeera English. Terrorism/terrorists. It says one person's terrorist is another's freedom fighter. We will not use these terms unless attributed to a source or person. Language matters. Words matter. So here's the question. Is refusing to use the T word, terrorist, ignoring reality? Or does it bring some desperately needed nuance to a complicated issue? Let's ask CNN political commentator S.E. Cupp. She's in Washington this morning. And former Al Jazeera journalist Ahmed Shihab Eldin. He is now an adjunct professor at Columbia University. Thank you both for being here.
Sure.
S.E., do you see a connection between what you heard from President Obama in that soundbite and what you see in a statement, in a memo from a network like Al Jazeera? Do you see a similar line of thinking or a similar ideology?
Yeah, these contortions to avoid reality are really motivated by a number of things. There is a desire not to offend, and there seems to be a belief that if we don't name the thing doesn't quite exist. And obviously, that's not reality. The White House, this administration, has not only gone to painstaking contortions to avoid calling groups terrorists or using the words Islamic extremism or radical Islam. It is also, Obama has time and time again gotten over his skis when it comes to foreign policy, saying that ISIS is al-Qaeda's JV team, that al-Qaeda is decimated, that Yemen is a success, that Benghazi was about a film. There's a desire to downplay the threat of terrorism so that it seems less of a threat, matched with the desire not to name the thing, and it becomes a really silly semantic exercise in political correctness that doesn't have an effect of ridding the world of terrorism. No positive outcomes have come from refusing to name the thing.
You know, I have to disagree with you, S.E. I don't think this is about contortions as much as this is an attempt to be constructive rather than destructive in terms of how we actually fight terrorism. I think this is an attempt to kind of reclaim Islam, to not allow these terrorists to use Islam and claim that they're doing this in the name of Islam. As we've seen, many Muslim leaders, many Muslims around the world condemn these acts. And so for as much as I understand why Obama and the Obama administration might be opening themselves up to criticism, I think this actually challenges what we've seen since 9/11, which is the equation, you know, equating terrorism with Islam, you know, playing on fear. And I think that for as much as we talk about this being semantics, for this being silly, it's very serious. You know, there's a misperception in America. The majority, or a significant number of Americans, have never met a Muslim. So they rely on the media, they rely on elected officials for how they use these sorts of terms and what those terms mean and how they internalize it and perceive this threat to be. And I just want to make one point. For as much as people say Obama's being silly, Obama's underplaying the threat, Obama's being irresponsible, I think it's much more irresponsible when elected officials such as Bobby Jindal talk about an invasion, a Muslim invasion, that Muslim immigration is an invasion. It's these kinds of things that play into the hands of these extremists who want to portray this as a clash between East and West.
But Ahmed, let me just
West.
respond to that, because I think you make some good points. However, I
Yeah.
think there's also kind of a straw man here. No one's saying that we're at war with Islam. The word is Islamic extremism. So that caveat is built in to the language, or radical Islam. The point is, the White House is not Islam's PR shop. It's moderate Muslims that are going to do the best work in communicating just the kinds of distinctions,
I completely
the important
agree.
distinctions
Well, speaking
that
of,
you're making. The United States' job is to name our enemies clearly, so that our allies overseas and our men and women fighting overseas know who they are.
Very quickly, you bring up our allies overseas. In order to keep our allies on board, in order to help fight this fight, in order to challenge and confront these terrorists where they are committing the biggest atrocities, which is in the Muslim world, and Muslims, as you know, are the biggest victims. We need to be responsible and we need to be accurate, as the White House said, and not, I agree, when you use the term radical Islam, it is different than Islam, but as you've seen with films like American Sniper, popular culture and the media internalizing a lot of kind of the Patriot Act and the language around that, I think there is a danger, whether intentionally or not, whether it's something that the media is knowingly doing, that continues to perpetuate this notion that Muslims are in fact something to be feared beyond just radical Muslims. And I think that we need to be just mindful of the tactics that the White House is employing.
Sure,
Let me
but
shift
let
a
me
little bit
just-
from the politics to the media of this, because I was really struck by a column I read this week in the UK newspaper, The Independent. It was talking about how the BBC Arabic channel is very careful about using this phrase or this label, terrorism. Let me read you the quote that stood out to me most from this column. It says, "Minus the terrorism tag, the threat from groups like these somehow feels less monstrous, more manageable." And then it went on to say, "We don't report on murderers as avengers, even though revenge might have guided their hand. Why then support groups that aim to sow terror by including that term in their title?" Ahmed, is there something to that idea that the language we use for things like this overinflates and over-dramatizes the threat that a country like the United States actually faces from terrorism?
Yeah, most certainly. It's hard to be definitive about it, but there was a statistic put out that's been, widely discussed and debated by the New America Foundation that found that right-wing extremists actually have killed more Americans since 9/11 than Muslim extremists. I bring that up because, in light of what happened in Paris just a few weeks ago, we also saw Europol come out with a statistic that suggested that only 2% of terrorist attacks in Europe in the last 5 years have been committed by Muslims. So there is a distortion, whether intentional or not, again, by the media, by Western governments, in terms of how Muslims are portrayed, how this threat is portrayed. And I think that, that's why exercising kind of responsibility, exercising caution is something that I think is only going to serve us well.
Well, I just wonder what's worse, to overinflate the threat or to downplay the threat too much. I personally feel we need to adjust our sense of how important terrorism is as a threat to the country versus all the other concerns and threats the United States faces. But Essie, I hear you jumping in there. Have the last word.
Well, listen, I heard President Obama in that interview with Fareed Zakaria mention this, that we don't want to inflate or give more prestige to these groups. In 2012, Hillary Clinton decided not to put Boko Haram on the terror watch list for exactly that reason. And as we now know, unfortunately, it did nothing to stop Boko Haram's reign of terror. Again, these semantic arguments, they're not unimportant, but they're distractions. And we all need to kind of face reality and name things for what they are. That's important. There's power in naming things.
Essie and Ahmed, thank you both for being here. Great discussion this morning.
Thanks.